Hello everyone. First I would like to apologize. I made this video several years ago and I plug my book way too much, and for that I'd like to apologize. I didn't redo it because I'm too lazy to redo it, and two, it captures a lot of the excitement I had at the time in using my power move system and explaining it. There's no real need to buy the book anymore since I share everything here on the Chef's Edge channel. Anyway, hope you learned something from it and talk to you later.
This is a game with me playing the black pieces against a low expert, and he opens with this F pawn, and at the time, I think that was the first time anybody had ever played this against me, and since I had never studied openings before, and I still haven't really, I just look at piece activity. I see where the pieces can move, and all using power moves as my guide. Power moves in 1, 2, and of course the other strategic elements of the game, which I discuss in the book. So chess is the known strategic elements, which I make it clear for the players, calling them strategic goals, what you're striving for. Because if you achieve more strategic goals, you play strategically according to principle, tactics emerge automatically. And tactics are found with power moves. So they are as one of my customers put it, the golden triangle of chess, which is my contribution, if I can say that. So I'm already looking at this check at the king. I go, ooh, cool. So I build my game around that, and of course the center has to be a consideration, because you want to restrict your opponent's piece activity, and he's trying to do the same to you. So I bring my knight out, also in preparation for castling and all of that, but I don't know if I ever do castle in this game, or maybe I castle long because of the way things pan out. So let's just look at these opening moves, and now I have a pin. Okay, and I remember doing this on purpose. I'm hoping to create further weakness here. I'm looking at, most of chess can be looked at in 1 and 2 moves. Although in the book I recommend looking 2.5 ply deep, which is my move, your move is 1 ply, my move, your move, and then my move. But a lot of great chess can be played in my move, your move, my move, which really isn't that deep. You don't have to calculate that far if you know exactly what you should be calculating. And it's the power moves in 1 and 2. Once you assess the threats and you contain threats, then this is what you're looking for. So you should always be looking at how your opponent, if you're giving him a power move. So when I moved my bishop here, I saw that he could harass it with a little guy, but I actually wanted him to do that. So in this way, you can use power moves as lures, but you have to be very careful. I mean, you really should not move around the board giving your opponent power moves because he gets the initiative. So you have to be very careful and determine very well if it's going to be advantageous to you. Otherwise, it can really turn around on you. So he does indeed do that, and I think I popped him. Yeah. Okay. So my mission was accomplished. I'm still looking at this hole towards the king, and the hole that was created here now. As Karpov says, any pawn move in front of the king is a weakness, is an attackable weakness. So the queen takes. I develop. I push a pawn so I can move my bishop out. He wants to develop this way, and I bring my bishop out. So I'm looking at bishop out here with the check, creating more weaknesses. As possibilities. When it's the right time, you don't do these things just because they're there. You do them if you gain something from it. You're either gaining more piece activity, preparing a tactic, being able to launch a tactic, or gaining a strategic goal, which will lead to further advantages. So he develops his bishop. I develop my knight, and he develops his bishop here in preparation for castling. We're both ready to castle now. It's short, and so you never know what your opponent is going to do, so you have to make sure that whatever threats you do have, it will further your plan, whether or not your opponent falls for your threat. So we see that this gives the pawn away, but he doesn't do that. In another game that I show here against a higher rated expert, 2100 plus 2140, he actually takes the pawn. Most people thought they would think, yeah, take the pawn and give it to him, but the compensation is the open file. I don't know if it's played well, better than he played it. Maybe it's wrong for me to give that pawn, but nonetheless, the final analysis, it's whether or not you win the game. There are no perfect chess games. Everybody makes mistakes, and so he castles. He does not grab the pawn, and I go for my, grabbing that hole there, and I'm looking. Another strategic goal of chess is to get bishops for knights, and I'm looking at that, and I see the fork here with my knight, and then I'm going to be able to pop off the bishop at the right time. I'm just gaining my pieces around his king for opportunities that may emerge. Just get a force majority. A force majority is a justification for an attack, and that's why the first skill you need to develop in chess is tactics, and you can do that. There are many websites where you can practice tactics, and but you find the tactics with power moves, which is what my book is all about. So he does little guy harassing big guy, which is power move number 5, attacking my knight. And I grab my hole. He actually wasted a whole move pushing my knight to where it wanted to go anyway. I think he was uncomfortable that the game didn't move in the direction that he had hoped for. From what I learned, he knows this opening very well. I think it's called the bird's opening, but that's not important. What's important is where the pieces are and what you do, and in the unknown and random positions. And in most all of my games, I'm in unknown and random positions, and it usually works out against players who, the problem with knowing openings, they're really advantageous for really master and a higher who can really punish you for playing odd moves. But I've discovered that from expert and all the way down, there are still many more moves that can be played, and many more wrong moves or weaker moves or suboptimal moves that can be made. So as long as you're playing with strong principles, you really shouldn't start worrying too much about openings, because that's not the main reason most players below expert lose. They're losing because they violate principles, and they haven't been taught how to maneuver around the board because there aren't enough books that actually explain how to do that. And that was the discovery I made, and which really elevated my play tremendously. So okay, he moves the rook, and now I'm not going to give him the pawn. I'm not going to give him the pawn here. And I'm just going to ram, because who knows, he may not take the pawn. I still want that open file. I'm going for his king now, and I guess I've decided not to castle short. So I defend the pawn. He had a threat here, and I didn't want him to open up my file to my king, and so I defended. And he brings his bishop out, and now I push, trying to get that open file. And I attack his queen. For a moment I lose a pawn, but it opens up my rook. So I sacked a pawn. Pawn sacks, if you are very careful and you calculate it properly, can increase your piece activity. And so he takes, and I bring my queen in. And I always knew I had this check, which is power move number 1. So that'll give me one step ahead of him whatever maneuver he makes. Like if he attacks my queen, as the computer is showing here. These are not my arrows. The computer is automatically putting them in. I can just pop off his bishop and then win the pawn. But I wanted more because he's undeveloped over here, and slowly I'm getting more and more pieces into play. And I know that is a good thing, just generally. So when you really learn all the principles that I discuss in the book, Chicago way, power move principles, and you let that guide your play, things emerge once you get good tactically, because you have to see that the tactics are there, and so you use power moves, like I said before, as your guide. So he develops. He sees that he needs to develop, and I castle. So I castle long, which I rarely do, but in this situation, it just seemed to be the thing to do. So now he attacks my queen, and instead of grabbing the bishop right now, I pulled back and just was waiting for more piece activity, because I see that there's just my pieces can get in more. I'm going to wait and get another man into play, rather, because the game is either moving towards a win, a draw, or a loss, and if you don't have a majority of force, odds are you're going to draw or lose. So he moves his pawn up. Now I get my knight into play. Okay, so now I've got 3 men on here. Now it's ready to grab that pawn. He takes, and I take back. First, always, consider your opponent's threats, and if you don't have the winning formula, which I discussed in the book, which is basically having the initiative, you have to address your opponent's threats. So he gets out of that. See, that's the other interesting thing. You keep that pressure on a piece, and with that check in play, and it starts to wear on your opponent. So he gets the bishop out of there, and now I grab the pawn. And so he slides over and attacks my knight. He wants to try and relieve the pressure. But now notice I've got this nice X-ray to the king, already powering up with my queen and rook. And now I grab the bishop. So mission accomplished. I get one of the he did get my bishop, and I got his dark square bishop. And he takes with the queen because he was probably thinking, I don't want to take with the knight, because I did all this work with my knight to relieve the pressure and trade off some pieces. But this was probably a mistake, because it got my rook into play, and it gave me the tempo. So I attacked the queen, which is power move number 2, or little guy harassing big guy, depending on how you want to look at it. So I attacked the queen, and I don't remember what the time pressure is here, but I'm going over these moves very quickly, but there was so much piece activity and so many possible moves and tactics available that the time, if you haven't played tournament chess, you really spend a lot of time on your moves, and I'm not sure if he was experiencing time pressure. We're only on move 22, but he moves his queen out of the way, and now, as the computer shows, it was a horrible move. I get a wonderful check, which forks the king and queen, and he can't afford to take it, because we also have this checkmate with here. So anyway, I do this check, and it's over, and he resigns, because it will be checkmate on the next move. So if he moves his king, we slide here with checkmate, and if he takes the knight, again we have checkmate. So there it is, outplaying my opponent with power moves, as you can do.